to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamoda and Danny Abdeljabbar, and we are greeted by our good friend Joseph Sullis Mullen. And first and foremost, Joe, we want to congratulate you on your run for senator of Michigan. It looks like you got roughly 56,000 votes, which honestly, it's like, just to run a campaign and to get 1% of the vote in a contested election is an accomplishment in itself. So I just wanted to start off by congratulating you. And really today we wanted to just talk about the election, your race, Michigan politics, and really where, what the aftermath for the country will look like with a really strong mandate for Trump. So, Joe, how's it going?
Well, it's going great. I'm excited to be here with you guys and to chit chat about this election that was very interesting on a number of levels. So
the first thing I actually noticed was that you got 56,000 votes. So the Michigan senator race between Slotkin and Rogers was really, really close. So Slotkin, she won by less than 18,000 votes. And you pulled 56,000 votes. So, I mean, in that case, you could be kind of seen as a spoiler.
For the Rogers camp, yeah. I mean,
yeah, for the Rogers campaign.
And if Slotkin had lost, like you said, it's 18,000 votes, which is basically nothing. The Green Party took 54,000. So right on my heels there, Doug Marsh, who's an independent journalist from the Ann Arbor area. You had all those college students and people from the Dearborn area showing up and throwing him votes in protest. It could very easily have gone the other way, and it would have been him, who's accused of, playing the spoiler. I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things where, look, we did not have 100% voter turnout. And so I think I mentioned this to you last time. My feeling on that has always been, look, there is definitely some overlap between Republican platforms and policies and Libertarian platforms and policies. However, we are not the same. And certain candidates are going to more closely align with our policy preferences, our platform, people like Tom Massey, people like Justin Amash formerly. So those people, it's very likely that, if you have a Republican candidate like that, it's going to get a lot of Libertarian votes. If Justin Amash had been the Republican Party candidate for Senate, he came in second in the Republican primary to Mike Rogers. I think I probably would have been down there with Chase at, less than 0.5%, to be honest with you, because Justin Amash is as close to a libertarian as you're ever going to get in a position where they could actually win a Senate seat, which that's not how I view third parties. It's not how my team and the Michigan Party, the Michigan Libertarian Party, views top of the ticket races either.
Well, I mean, if anyone's to blame, I think for like being a spoiler, I think it's Doug Dern from the Natural Law Party, because he got about that 18,000 vote difference, and I have no idea what the Natural Law Party has to do with it.
Well, I'll tell you this: I was actually having a conversation with Andrew Chatterton, who's our state party chair, and I said, "Look, Andrew, honestly, I feel like now is the time to approach Pete Hoekstra is the name of the GOP state party chair, because we kind of view top of the ticket races for third parties as being not winnable races. And what it is an opportunity to get your message out, to clearly articulate what you stand for. But what you really would like to do is to be able to court the major parties, to get them to want your votes bad enough to make concessions for you. Now, the Michigan GOP, rewind 2 years before Pete Hoekstra took over, they were in a total mess. And he basically had to rebuild it, they put together a very strong campaign and came up just short. But they never reached out to us. They had no interest in trying to see what policies we were interested in. What could they do to try and get us to turn out and vote for their candidate? And so I think this is an opportunity for us now to say, look, you thought you could do it without us. You, in fact, cannot. So do the smart thing. And when we call you next time, pick up the phone, invite us to the table, ask, what can we do for you? Because this idea that, well, they were so close and the party's still rebuilding and they'll clearly get them next time. I don't. Every election is a new game. The Democrats in Michigan this year faced some pretty serious headwinds that were not every cycle. For example, Alyssa Slotkin was facing a lot of resistance from some of their main strongholds over her unwillingness to condemn the Biden administration and their policy toward the Palestinians. There was the fact that her top of the ticket, her incumbent, the Joe Biden administration was terrible, objectively very bad. And Kamala Harris did very little to distance herself from that. Almost nothing, actually. I think she was asked, what would you have done differently? And
nothing
point
comes
blank,
to mind.
she said nothing. She said nothing. And so the fact that Alyssa Slotkin was still able to eke this one out, I view that as like, look, this was the bottom for the Democrats too. You're never going to get an easier race to beat a Democrat for a Senate seat. No Republican has won a Senate seat in Michigan in my lifetime. Actually, you know what? They might have won one like 32 years ago. But they haven't won one in like the last several decades, right? And this was your chance and you blew it. And there's no guarantee that next time it's going to happen. And so when I look at people like Doug Dern and Dave Stein, people who their parties are the Natural Law Party and the Taxpayer/Constitutional Party, these are small government anti-tax parties. These are parties that could very easily be brought into a coalition with the Libertarian Party to exert pressure on top of the ticket candidates on the Republican side. That's really where third parties can have an influence at top of the ticket elections. Like local races, go for it. Try and win your local races. Get out there, knock those doors. You can knock several hundred doors, and you can convince your local your neighbors and whatnot to get out and vote for you. They know you. But when you're talking about a governor's race, a Senate race, I mean, $100 million was spent on this race. You as a third party candidate have zero chance of winning that. Just like Chase Oliver at the national level saying, I'm going to get 5% or I'm going to win this or that. Like, no, you're not. You 100% are not. I will give you plus 1,000, any amount of money you want, every election from now until I die. It's never going to happen. The system is set up this way. And so you have to look for ways to move the ball. Look for places where policy can happen. It's the same way I view working with people who disagree with you about a majority of issues. For example, in Michigan, there's a very strong DSA group. There's a pretty strong Green Party. I have no objection to working with those groups on issues where we agree. Things like decriminalization, emptying out the prisons of the nonviolent drug offenders, all that stuff. Like, sure, let's work together on those issues.
Right.
But in terms of actually getting a party to listen to us, it's never going to be the Democrats. The Green Party is going to be trying to exert that pressure on the Democrats, just like we are trying to exert that pressure on the Republicans. The Libertarian Party, especially over the last several years, has trended more and more towards the old right, if you will, in line with like Rothbard and Raimondo's books on the subject. And so that being the case, I think you have to fish where the fish are, man. Like that's where it is. So,
well, extrapolating from what you said there, Joe, if indeed, your votes could be proxy Republican votes if they courted you accordingly, and if the Taxpayer Party and the Natural Law Party falls more in line with libertarian views, then your collective votes would have been somewhere in the almost 100 or 100,000 vote range, which would have made a clear win for the Republican side. So I'm looking at this moving forward. I think it's also true that the Democratic Party should be similarly courting the Green Party, because 54,000 votes for the Green Party in your state is not a small number either. And it was within the margin of error for winning. But if y'all made a coalition together, I could see a path for a Republican Senate seat in your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that's
if
an
they're
interesting.
willing, if they're willing to reach out and make those policy concessions.
Mm-hmm.
With the Green Party here in Michigan, I feel like their problem here is that the issues that were able to move the needle here are not issues that can play outside of Michigan or Minnesota. And actually, the Harris campaign was running different ads about the war in Michigan versus in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, the Harris ads were, "We stand with Israel," et cetera, et cetera. Here in Michigan, it was, "We want a ceasefire right now." And so it's very tough because you need those votes. Like Alyssa Slotkin won, but it was by the skin of her teeth. You need those votes. You really do. And like, let's be real. Mike Rogers was not a popular candidate. He underperformed Trump by 1.5 points. That's huge. That's a huge margin. Like, he underperformed Trump by 1.5 points. So, you know, this race could have gone either way there. And I definitely think that the challenges that the Democratic Party faces in terms of getting those voters back, you know, I actually had a group from that area reach out to me and with GOP credentials about doing something moving forward. And I really feel like the Democrats should be careful there, because that is a constituency that they could very easily lose, especially with a lot of the more culturally progressive stances that the party has increasingly adopted. Those are not positions that speak to that community and its values, which are much more conservative, much more traditional. And so, you know, you could wind up with one of those situations where today, you know, you heard a lot of that on CNN, like, what happened? You know, we got a bunch more Hispanic people, and, you know, they're brown, so they were supposed to vote Democrat. What happened here? And it's like, well, you know, they tend to be culturally pretty conservative. You know, Ronald Reagan actually had said back in the 80s, when he did that immigration deal and the populist right were coming after him, saying, "What are you doing? They're going to be flooding into the country." And Ronald Reagan said, "You know, most Hispanics are conservatives. They just don't know it yet." And Trump and the Republicans have seen gains year after year on year with Hispanic voters, even though the rhetoric has gotten much harder in terms of immigration. You know, you rewind to the George W. Bush years, and then you look where we are now. The rhetoric, the policies are very different. You'd think that they'd be a turnoff. They're not. They're doing even better than they were, much better. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting there. It's really incredible to see the battleground sweep, like all 7 states. Boom. Just that was pretty incredible. And didn't you feel like it was pretty clear early on in the night? Like, just with the way the early voting totals were going, like, that the Democrats did not have a big enough lead.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, me personally, I was sitting there watching, and I'm like, well, you can't really make assumptions too early, because, you know, there are states that take longer, you know, than others to tabulate their votes, and especially in battleground states where they have like a million more eyes and a much higher stakes, they're going to take longer to come around. And of course, you got California, which is the biggest prize. That's not going to happen for a couple hours. So, you know, coming from more of a left-leaning standpoint, you're sitting there and you're watching the totals, and you're hoping, you're thinking, you're praying that the early gains that Trump has, the races that he's calling, aren't the end of the game, right? And that's where you can even just watch if you were watching Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters, everybody's excited until like maybe, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And then they're like, oh, okay, this is how it's going to go down. What do you think, Henry? How did you feel about it?
So going in, was pretty much I thought it was a coin flip, but Trump had a slight edge. What before the election? No, about a couple days before, I was like, I think I was convinced Trump was going to win because of a New York Times article that stated that they were having trouble with white Republicans answering polls or poll calls. So I was like, the polling is probably off, and even if it's off just by a little bit, it will probably be enough for Trump to get at the very least Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I didn't really think he was going to win Michigan. It was a surprise to me. I thought it was going to be Wisconsin and Pennsylvania that he won, and also Nevada. I mean, Nevada and Arizona looks like I don't know if they haven't called it yet, but it looks overwhelmingly win those. So I had a feeling going in, and then just like by the early results, even just like in Florida, like he won by over a million votes in Florida. I figured that was going to carry on to other states as well. So I was pretty early on, I was convinced that he was going to win.
Yeah, I felt similarly. Like I said, just seeing the early voting come in, and also there was just there were several very interesting dynamics to this campaign, all of which I thought favored Trump, because it's going to come down to those 7 states, and you had all sorts of interesting things that were all flowing in Trump's direction. Number one, you had the problem of the terrible Biden presidency. It was objectively not a good period. And you can say all sorts of things about, well, the money printing and all that stuff, it happened while Trump was president. The inflation only started firing up once Biden took office. It's like, yeah, that's completely fair, but that's not really how people experienced it. And I have a pretty bleak view of voter competency in that regard. Like, and then you had the fact that Kamala Harris was just not very good in terms of, I mean, she didn't have to go through the grueling primary process. Say whatever you want about Hillary Clinton. She had been through the process enough times that she was a battle hardened, like you could put her in front of a microphone and she could do it. Kamala Harris looked very lost, very confused, was terrible at just like speaking and doing interviews. And
that's why she didn't do very many of them.
Yeah, and you had this base that was already very iffy on her. Henry and I had talked about this, that we didn't vote for, that she was just kind of forced on us here. And she did nothing to distance herself from this exceedingly unpopular presidency. If it had been me, if I'm Kamala Harris, the literal first thing I'm doing is throwing Joe Biden and his team under the bus. That's the first. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to say, look, Vice President has no power at all. I tried to tell them that this was a bad idea. That was a bad idea. No one would listen to me. For Joe Biden's getting put out to pasture. Who cares? Blame everything on him. Put as much distance between him and yourself as you can. Instead, she didn't do that. You had those highly particular issues in places like Michigan where, you just weren't going to be able to get the vote out there. You had inflation, which was a serious issue. All of this going against her. On the other side, Trump was benefiting from something that we've not seen in any of our lifetimes. It hasn't happened in over 100 years. But we're all familiar with the fact that once a president leaves office, in retrospect, he starts to look better. His approval numbers go up the more years you get away from his presidency. Look at George W. Bush now. Look at where he was when he left office and look at his approval ratings now. People love George W. Bush now. Trump was benefiting from that same phenomenon. Look at where his approval ratings were when he left office, and they rose. They consistently rose all the way up to the eve of this particular election. And so Trump was benefiting from that very odd, what shall we call it? That odd nostalgia that gives rise to that. Oh, things weren't so bad under him, and things were actually maybe kind of good. And yeah,
well, he was the only other president outside of like Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive terms, right?
Yeah,
and that was in like late 1800s, right? Like
precisely
1894 or some shit like that, right?
And so you had all these things working for him there and working against Harris. And it was like, man, these battleground states aren't decided by very much. I mean, I'm looking at Michigan right now. They've had the last few crawl in here now. And it's like, we're looking at 80,000 votes here. 80,000 votes is nothing. Wisconsin, again, we're talking 30,000 votes. I mean, Trump is winning these things by the skin of his teeth here. 100,000 votes in Pennsylvania. And it's like, man, it could have been different. So yeah. But instead, they a clean sweep of the battleground states there, but probably by less than a cumulative million votes.
I'd agree with you on some of your assertions about Harris. Not entirely, but we come from different perspectives, of course. I actually do think that I'm a more informed voter. At least I'd like to believe I am, and so I understand that inflation has very little to do with the immediate presidency, right? These are cycles and terms where policy doesn't really kick in or have an impact until many years later, right? There were factors beyond anyone's control. We think about COVID, and we blame Trump for COVID, but we can also blame Biden for COVID. And there's a little bit of that split there. I think what really stuck out to me in terms of like what was working against Kamala is obviously not being the chosen pick, right? I think being foisted upon the Democratic Party in such a way, you could argue undemocratically, it definitely didn't give people confidence. And I think while I agree with you that she probably should have thrown Joe Biden under the bus a little bit, I think even more effectively, she didn't do a very good job at explaining why why her policies were going to be better for the US. I feel like we did a Hillary 2.0 on this one. People voted for Kamala not because they liked Kamala or because they believed in her policy or messaging, maybe a little bit. It was mostly because Trump was, quote, a enemy of democracy, right? It was an anti-Trump vote. And we already learned in 2016 that doesn't work, right? It's not exciting to vote for the candidate that sucks just because you think the other one sucks more. It doesn't invigorate the crowd. And just you listed all those numbers off of like how narrowly Trump won many of these battleground states. I mean, this with a more electric candidate, this could have easily gone the other way.
Well, even Hillary Clinton had some diehard supporters. Like if you like Clinton rallies, they were, they were full. She had her diehards. Didn't really seem like anyone, like even the core of her base wasn't really excited. Like she had that rally in Houston, and the only reason people came was because Beyonce was there, and they thought that she was going to do a musical performance. And then when she didn't do a musical performance, there wasn't a riot. That might be over exaggerating it, but there were people who were really angry that they thought they were going to a concert. So just things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think what Danny said, just, Michael Tracy, the journalist, he was interviewing a lot of people. He was interviewing mainly Democrats in Pennsylvania. And even the ones who were voting for Kamala were saying that, they felt really weird about the fact that she was just foisted upon them and that there was no primary. So I think that was across the board, because we're talking about somebody who, she was the first person to drop out of the primary in 2020. It makes you think that once Biden had that disastrous debate performance where, people realized his brain was oatmeal, that they just decided to take the L and to re-roll. That was a feeling I got. Like they were just like, we're gonna re-roll in 4 years, and we may as well just throw up Kamala to lose. We can scapegoat her, and then we can run somebody like, the big name now is Shapiro out of Pennsylvania. And I guess the rumor is that Shapiro didn't want to run because he knew it was a losing race. So there's that. I don't know.
We should have took the L in 2020 because, frankly, incumbency often gives you, a little bit of an edge, even though it's very uncharacteristic statistically that Trump lost that election.
They couldn't take the L in 2020. It was just, there was just too much momentum, and with COVID and the Floyd riots and all that stuff, like there was just way too much momentum. And Both parties were treating it as a zero-sum game, especially the Democrats to foist Trump out of office. This time,
But they picked Biden, man. Like,
but the thing is, though,
I didn't even
Biden
hate the Biden pick though. Like the idea that
Yeah.
Biden is a one-term guy and a bridge to a younger, more exciting future. Okay. And then you picked Kamala Harris,
right.
a bridge to nowhere. A bridge to nowhere. And then Biden turns out to be, an 80-year-old guy. He's slowing down. And he says, I can't step down. I'm the only one who can beat him because he spent time with Kamala and knows she can't do it. And now, like Henry said, once Biden had to step down, you remember the New York Times and Washington Post editorial boards were all like, we can't have Kamala be the person. We have to do something else. But it was like, you can't move her aside. So it's better to just run her now and just wash your hands of it and run someone more competitive in 2028. I mean, if you ask me,
is it?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't personally like the guy, but to me, it seems like either Pritzker or Shapiro would be the guy to go with there. I know Gretchen Whitmer gets a lot of play as well too. But yeah, I don't know. Midwest governors, man. I think that's where the Democrats need to go. And Tim Walz was the only one they could get to sign up.
They're going to go with a guy who's more appealing to white voters. That's who I think. I mean, a lot of things. The political landscape can change, though. The Trump. Listen, I'm not bullish on this Trump administration. It could be a complete disaster. This presidency, as far as we know. So, I mean, who knows what the political landscape will look like? It certainly seems like, to the benefit of right-wing politics, there has been a shift in the culture where people are more right-wing and less, the woke culture seems to be dead. You can get away with really saying anything, even if it's insensitive. Towards other races
Trump can
and
get away with
sexes,
saying anything if it's insensitive.
Protected
I don't
groups.
think that's universally true.
No, I'm just saying more generally. There's it's a lot less restrictive than it used to be. Like 2021, that was like the height of like a woke culture, and I feel like that's peeled back, especially since Elon Musk has purchased Twitter. But with Trump, there was a sense I got that the deep, and I think I said this to Joe. I've said this to you, Danny, a million times on this podcast, that there was a sense that the deep state had made peace with Trump. If you look at, and when I say deep state, that's just kind of a shoo-in for like the establishment. Just look at his donors. Like all of his donors are like the richest man in the world was one of his primary backers. Elon Musk. Essentially, I don't even know how what he did was legal. Giving people $1 million checks for signing a petition to vote. Like that.
He recently argued in court that it wasn't a lottery because they were trying to get him on like it being a lottery, and only Pennsylvania can do lotteries in Pennsylvania. He said it wasn't a lottery. It's not actually random. We're actually choosing people who we believe would be good representatives of this messaging, and we're giving those people $1 million. So basically, they admitted to frauding people, but that's not illegal in any way. So yeah, it was total fucking Ponzi.
It was just such a weird thing. It was just such a wild thing to do. It's like enter the sweepstakes to vote. If you vote Republican, like you have a chance to win $1 million. It was a weird thing, but it felt like at the very least borderline election interference, and everyone engages in election interference. I'm not kind of singling out Musk,
some capacity, yeah.
But there was just so much momentum and support from the billionaire class towards Trump this time around that it just seemed like he couldn't win. Just look at the big look at the top 10 donors. I think like 9 out of 10 of them donated towards Trump. So it's you can make the case that the billionaires in Wall Street have realized that the country was being mismanaged and they don't want things to get any worse. Or, you can think in a more cynical view that this is obviously some type of they want something in return. They're buying him off. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Yeah, they're buying him off for some for their own interest.
Why not both?
But there could be a little bit of that going on. But I mean, let's not forget, Elon Musk became the richest guy in the world off of government subsidies. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone wants to act like, oh, great innovator, that's why he's so rich. It's like, he'd have been bankrupt. He'd have been done. Right. His companies would have been cooked. His companies would have been cooked without U.S. tax dollars.
Well, let's put it this way.
And he's the Pentagon's biggest contractor. Like, he's going to fight the deep state for you? Okay. Got some more Kool-Aid for you right over here if you want it.
The conservatives just didn't win the war of ideas. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't win the marketplace of ideas. Like, there is very real people with very real interest who are invested in the Trump campaign. It wasn't like, oh, the marketplace of ideas was completely free and we just won. Like, no, like, there is a reason why Elon Musk bought Twitter. To control, essentially, like, alternative media. There's always somebody, there's always something deeper than just like, oh, we convinced them with their ideas, so everyone went Republican.
I mean, there was a bias in social media towards liberalism and progressivism, and whatnot, and so it was, of course, it was kind of like evening things out. But yeah, he's definitely looking to capitalize on that. But I was just looking here at this. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on this. The control of the House still up for grabs here. Yep. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Because I'm just waiting. I mean, I've been waiting, and it's just agonizing. Like, for God's sake, count those votes.
The Trump's going to take that too.
You think the Republicans are going to get the House?
Yeah, no, I think it's a clean sweep. I'm a insane person, and I like data. So I've been working on two specific things, but one of them was looking at the statistics around election outcomes. And a few of the things that I looked into was, what is the likelihood that an incumbent president wins? And I learned that this is, Biden winning and then now Trump winning is uncharacteristic, which is wild. But I also looked into, when they win, when any president wins, what's the likelihood that they get a clean sweep, right? That trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And actually, it's more likely than not, since 1900, that if you win the presidency, you also, within your first term, get a clean sweep. Now, technically, this is not Trump's first term, right? So this is going against the grain here. But the trends are telling me that the likelihood is very high. And based on how he swept so far the Senate and all of the battleground states, I actually believe that he'll get it. What I think is also interesting is that in more cases than not, when you get a trifecta, you also lose that control of the Congress within the first midterm thereafter. There's a commensurate rebalancing that happens immediately after. So if we take all those things to be true, Trump won the presidency. He already has control of the Senate. He's probably likely going to get the House, and now he has a 2-year mandate to get shit done, and only 2 years, because I can say with pretty good statistical confidence that it's going to swing right back in 2 years. And that brings up a lot of questions about, like, how much do you think any president can do in 2 years? I also looked into that too, but I want to get your all's reaction on that.
I don't know. I mean, I hear you. I hear you on that. As far as the statistics go on that, I've just been looking at these districts, and it's like, they only need 13 more. I think they need 13 more to lock it up. And I'm just looking at all these counties that are reporting in, and like, I struggle to find 13 reds. You know what I mean? And, waiting on California, waiting on Oregon, waiting on Washington, all Democratic incumbents. I think there's 3 in California that lean Republican. And even those districts in Iowa that are waiting to report in, those are right near the urban areas. So I don't know. I mean, I hear you. This has been a peculiar election, though. I mean, just the way that the Republicans swept to it, they were close. Like, yes, they did take the Senate, and they did take all the battleground states, but man, it was so close. And I'm just looking at a lot of these races that have yet to be called, and so yeah, I don't know. I won't be surprised, but I'm also just dying to see what actually happens. Like,
It'll
come on,
be
you leaving me
several days
hanging
before
here.
you get it, you know?
Oh man, it's killing me. 205. Yeah, they need 13. They need 13 more. Might find some there in Arizona, maybe.
Part of me
Yeah.
part of me doesn't want them to, the Republicans to take
3,
the House as
4.
well, because I think it sends the wrong signals to a Trump presidency that he has a mandate to do whatever the hell he likes, and I think that'll create really poor choices, in my opinion. I think the best choices come out of good common sense compromise, and having some balance in at least one chamber of Congress, being kind of the bulwark to a runaway conservative policy.
What's the
machine.
compromise? To fund Ukraine and Israel more? We found the compromise.
I hadn't spoken about any specific policies in mind, but I think just generally speaking, it's in my opinion not good to have full control over all three branches, and especially when you consider that there's already a conservative majority on the court as well. That's too autocratic for my for my liking. And I'd feel the same way if it was all Democratic as well. Just to be very clear, I wouldn't like it that way.
Well, to make you feel better, Danny, the policy differences between Democrats and Republicans are growing slimmer.
Yep.
There's really not that much different than your average Republican and your average Democrat. And I am happy to see the Biden administration be punished for. Well, let me ask you something, Joe, before we get into this. You being in Michigan, you're definitely going to have a much better pulse than I would. How much did the Gaza situation play into Kamala losing Michigan?
Well, let me just pull that back up to confirm, because they've been tacking on just kind of, they didn't call Michigan till like this afternoon. So let me just see what the final numbers there were for Michigan. Let's see here. So the final numbers there, yeah, 40,000. Yeah, that was the margin. That was the margin right there. Ooh, dang, that was so close. 50? No, that wouldn't have been enough. No, still would have been just short. So, I mean, it's hard to know how many stayed home, like just did not participate. I believe she got fewer votes than Biden did. But yeah, the Green Party's total alone wasn't enough. So, I mean, it definitely played into it. I mean, just there's very few ways to explain the amount of votes that went to Doug Marsh and then Jill Stein. So yeah, it's hard to know precisely how much. I mean, they'll probably need to do some, I'm sure there will be some good qualitative research that's done on this. I mean, they're going to get people on the ground, do some asking, because there's only so much that the raw numbers can tell us. But the Slotkin was very, very tuned into that. I had actually pulled up every statement that she made since October 7th to see how she was handling this issue.
Mm.
And man, she's made for politics. Let me tell you something. She is made for politics. She said absolutely nothing while seeming to be just entirely sympathetic and working so hard. And also, I'm not on anybody's side, but also this. And, I did support Israel, but I told Israel, don't you do that. And, I made it so that the Palestinians would get this and that. And I made sure I listened to my constituents. It was really, I mean, whereas Kamala Harris basically just was, it took her way too long to get wise to that. I mean, but again, she's balancing. I'm a national. It's easier for Alyssa Slotkin. Alyssa Slotkin only has to worry about the politics of Michigan. She can afford to keep Joe Biden and Kamala Harris at arm's length and to pick and choose what she wants to say and to finally tailor her message. Kamala Harris is not able to do that. No Democratic presidential candidate is able to do that. And in some ways, the Democratic coalition is so diverse in that way that, it's tough to hit all those issues. But
did you hear what Kamala said? Did you hear what Kamala said when someone asked her about like what she would do for Palestinians or how she would like gain the trust of Muslims in Michigan? And she said, well, there's something, I'm paraphrasing her. She's like, yeah, it's horrible, but I think it's more important when you look in your wallet, in your pocketbook, in the price, in the standard of, and she is completely
trying to deflect to something that she's still weak on.
She deflected in a very crude, off-putting way, and it's amazing that she. Honestly, it's amazing that she's in politics at all, given how poor of a speaker she is.
No, you are right there. I just checked on that, by the way, and there was basically a 1 million vote flip. Like Harris got 1 million votes fewer than Biden in 2020, and Trump got 1 million more votes than he did in 2020. So it's hard to know. So
those were those middle of the road voters. Do we assume that?
Yeah, could be some middle of the road voters there. Trump did make some gains among like minority males, and women,
younger
and
males
some
in general.
and younger males in general, and women voters. Which is something that watching CNN and MSNBC this morning was like next level cope. Like it's hard not to just shake your head every time they talk, because it's like you learned nothing. You learned nothing from losing here. You'd think they learned something from all these years, and it's just those uneducated white women and those black men who didn't show up for Kamala, and it's like, yeah, it couldn't possibly be that there's something wrong with your party's platform and their approach to politics. And I mean, you can't lead the electorate. You've got to kind of get behind whatever wind the electorate is pushing. And, I don't know. It's very tough. I mean, especially because the Harris campaign made a deliberate effort to try and reach out to men. I mean, it was obviously very astroturfed and obvious, but they at least made an effort. The Trump administration made virtually zero effort to reach out to women and still improved. I don't know. I mean, the Democrats really rely on identity politics, on the identity coalition, and it's just not working. It's not working. And they just got this hodgepodge of issues that don't fit well together, like, which we know from polling data, like, especially among like black men, for example, like, they literally care so little about things like trans rights and LGBT. Like, that's so low, it's almost underground for them. And yet it's like a leading policy plank. But you expect them to show up for you when eggs quadrupled in cost. Same with suburban women. We'll protect your right to vote. Well, she's out there doing grocery shopping for her family and seeing that the the bill is worse and worse, which again, to someone who understands what, where inflation comes from and stuff, you can just look and say, well, most of this money creation happened under Donald Trump's watch. And, he shut down the economy, which created supply chain issues, which further increased price pressures and stuff. But that's just not how politics happens. It is not a battle of ideas or reasoned opinions. That's just not how it is. Which is sort of a sad commentary, but this is not news. And like you said, I mean, she just did not do a good job getting out there and fighting to make a clear case for why her policies were going to be good for the country. And that ultimately, like we were saying, tens of thousands of votes here. Like, these were winnable. Despite everything, the bad incumbency problem, Trump just being able to basically complain and say everything was much better under me, and people have already forgotten about that stuff, So, yeah, I don't know. I definitely don't want the Republicans to win the House. I love divided government because it means less and less things will get done. That's my favorite. So I'm really hoping the Democrats are able to pull the House out here. Because I mean, the Republicans otherwise will have the courts, they'll have both chambers, they'll have the White House, and those small government libertarian people on the internet, like, they're deluding themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump is literally telling you, Mike Pompeo, he's my boy. You know, the whole administration, Elliot Abrams, he's my guy. Like, he's literally telling you, and you've got like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard as like this like front showpiece thing. No.
Which are not even that great.
You're gonna create a new government department. You're gonna create a new government department.
The Doge department?
To go find the waste in the other departments. It's like, I already know where this is gonna go. Mm-hmm. Soon that'll be a huge bureaucracy, and we're not cutting anything. Mm-hmm. So, no, it's ridiculous.
Yes. I mean, these are some last minute appeals to get libertarians to vote for him. I am not confident that this new bureau that Elon Musk is going to be ahead of. It's not entirely clear. I don't really think there's a cogent plan. He just said, all he really did is say Ron
efficiency.
Paul. Mm-hmm. He said Ron Paul. I love Ron Paul, first and foremost, but Ron Paul is 87 years old? 80. He's in his late 80s. He's going to head this department in his late 80s. It's silly, but now we're going to have a switch, and he's been saying some things that have been kind of hinting that he's going to run a less hawkish foreign policy, but it doesn't really matter what you say. It matters who you're bringing in and who is funding you. Agreed. And if you look at his main funders, man, it's a good portion of his funding are Zionist hawks who want the U.S. to get more engaged and have a more hostile than they already do against Iran, and to give them diplomatic cover. Or to give the Israelis diplomatic more cover than they do, which I don't know is possible. But you said it, Mike Pompeo is going to be part of the administration. Who are some other bad guys Tom Cotton might be part of the administration as well. That's a rumor.
Yep.
That's terrifying. Like, I can't think of anyone worse than Tom Cotton to have a position of power in a Trump administration. I guess it
depends on where they put him, right?
Yeah, he might be the very, top 5 worst people that you could bring in. So, am I confident?
This is par for the course for Trump, though. I mean, like, this is another thing that I wanted to look into, but like, if you look at Trump's first term, I don't have the data to back this up, but some gut feeling in me from experience tells me that he's lost more cabinet members than any other president in my like lifetime. He doesn't pick good people. Like, he doesn't pick the best people, like he says. He picks whatever is benefiting him in the moment, right? And maybe in a certain way that is the best picks, right? Best picks for him, but he doesn't pick good cabinet members.
He's
going to be a disaster.
He was on Rogan. He was on Joe Rogan, and the Rogan, I found it kind of boring. I don't know if you guys listened to the Rogan. Yeah. I found it kind of boring, but I did find something interesting. He did say, like how Biden, not Biden. Rogan asked him, like, hey, what was it like when you're running this campaign and you're president now? Like, what was that like? And he just kind of went on a tangent about how, like, he didn't really know anything about DC. He'd never been to DC overnight, and he just didn't really have a network there. So he had no idea who to hire. And he basically gave the story of why he hired so poorly. I don't think that is obviously remedied, and you're going to get some pretty freaky people in his administration. We'll see who is his Secretary of State. We'll see who his Secretary of Defense is. It really does seem that Mike Pompeo is going to have either be a national security advisor. He's either going to be Secretary of Defense, or he could be Secretary of State, which all 3 are bad. I don't know if you can get worse than Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken might be the worst Secretary of State of our lifetime. I think he might be the dumbest. The thing about Vince Cheney, why did I say Vince Cheney?
I don't know. Dick Cheney's still my
Dick Cheney
number one.
is that, Dick Cheney was obviously horrible, but like there was like some level of intellect there, even though he was evil.
Sure,
was
but
bad.
That's worse. He was a smart, evil person.
There was some level of intellect and I've heard this from people that know him, who have worked with him. He's dumb. Like he's so dumb that he doesn't know he's dumb. Like he's just a dumb idiot who will go along with anything.
It explains a lot, but
that's a problem. So I don't know. Like I think there's some level, even if someone's super hawkish, I think someone from Mike Pompeo might be able to deal with Putin to some degree. Like he may be able to talk to the Lavrov and come to some type of settlement. I don't think that Blinken even has the capability of like talking on the phone with other diplomats. And
I got to hear what Joe has to say about this. I need to hear this.
Well, I will say this: the first thought that popped into my head was you got to throw Jake Sullivan there as like maybe the worst national security advisor since the George W. Bush years.
Okay.
Certainly. Look, I saw the bit of the Rogan interview that Henry was referencing there, and look, in the very same breath where he's saying, "Look, I didn't know anything. That's why I hired these people." He went on to say, "But I love those people like John Bolton because I brought them with me, and other countries were dying to deal with me because they were worried I was going to invade their country." And then you look at who he has surrounded himself with. Look, if John Bolton hadn't written that book criticizing Trump, the room where it happened, I'll bet you dollars to donuts he'd be back in there. Because he's very close with the Adelsons, and that Chinese casino money is what was propping up Donald Trump's campaign. And Mike Rogers' campaign, not to throw any mud. The guy did lose, but that's him too. So, no, I was just going through some statistics here, just looking at Trump's gains among women, several points, and among Hispanic voters, 13-point increase from 2020. That's huge. I mean, these are the core pieces of the Democratic constituency that you need to get these votes. And so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see whether, next cycle this returns to trend, because that's a huge swing. And again, cost of living concerns were almost number one on every single poll that I saw of like what are voters' number one priorities right now. And again, people look and they're like, it costed this much when Trump was in office. It costs this much now. Ipso facto, I need Trump back, so eggs will be $1 again.
Right.
Eggs will not be $1 again, but, it'll take time for that to happen. Part of me is annoyed, though, that Trump is going to get the benefit of, coming back in as inflation has already cooled, as the economy straightens out. It's going to be like, see, I told you all I'd fix it, when, like, literally nothing changed at all.
I mean, that's kind of the history of, like, the cycle of Democrat to Republicans. It's always Republicans fuck it up, Democrats make it moderately better, and then Republican comes back and says like, "Hey, look what I did," and then fuck it up again. It's just
how much did the Nasdaq and the SP 500 go up today?
A lot. Mine are I don't know specifically a lot, but I was looking at my stocks earlier today and I'm up.
Yeah, a lot of it was overnight.
Yeah, I mean
around 9 o'clock.
The Nasdaq QQQ ETF went up 13% since. Shit, man.
13% today.
No, $13, not 13%. That'd be insane. It went up
2.72%.
2.7% today. So, I mean, there's obviously a market reaction. I was expecting much bigger swings on election night. I mean, there were some big swings, but I thought the swings were going to be bigger than they were. But once the betting markets evened out, it seemed like the market started to rise. So I mean, I don't know the correlation of that, if it's just investor confidence because of lower corporate taxes with the Trump administration, which will probably be one of the main initiatives, or one of the few things that they will do. But
I want to talk. I want to talk about that because I did a bunch of research earlier today about. The long and short of it is that I'm doing some research on whether or not presidents hold their promises, and shocker, they don't. Right? But I am super interested in y'all's perspective on like what is our prospectus on this next Trump presidency, and of all 200 promises that he has in this stupidly long document that I was reading earlier, which are the ones that you think are most likely to occur and how? That's what I'm interested to talk about.
What campaign promises from Trump that will most likely happen?
Right, and if you want, I can drop you the link to just his. We can either go.
What's his biggest? What do you think his biggest?
Or,
what? Just maybe let's just say maybe what his biggest promise. Or okay,
here are the. Hard for me to tell you what his biggest promise, but the first one he writes is seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. And I think it's pretty high up on a lot of people's minds. So interesting that doesn't comport with polling data where the number one thing that everyone wants is to fix the economy. And his number one thing is to seal the border invasion. Kind of somewhat tangentially related, but I already find that pretty interesting. On the Harris side, similar outlook, right? Economy's not the number one for them either. So do we think
what was the number one thing for Harris?
I'll pull it up right now.
Don't tell me it was fucking democracy.
It might be.
Jesus.
How do they still have
democracy?
I'm sorry. They changed their website already. I can't look at their things anymore. It's now a concession website and all their policies are gone. I can't tell you. If I remember correctly, it was probably like saving democracy or something fucking
whatever that
stupid.
means.
Right. So but we moved past Kamala. She lost. It's over. Joe, what do you think on this immigration issue? You think Trump's got a shot at making something happen here?
Well, I guess I would ask, what do you have in mind exactly? Like, are you talking
mass
about his plan?
Family separation?
Are you talking about like mass deportations and stuff? Like, what he was talking on the campaign trail, or are we back? Like, we're gonna build Castle America, build the wall and stuff? Because I feel like if you're saying is something going to happen, like a bill, like some kind of immigration reform bill, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, they had one lined up in this last legislative session before Trump whispered in their ear, like, yeah, kill this thing. I don't want to give Joe Biden any kind of legislative victory in an election year. So, like, I could see a bill getting passed. There's all kinds of, like, small tweaks you could make, to the existing immigration policy because it's just, kind of haphazard and cobbled together. But in terms of, like, really big things that might, like, seriously address things, like, no, I don't see Donald Trump getting really anything done. Deportations will probably go up. ICE raids will probably go up. Hopefully
that's the problem with these campaign promises, though. They're written for like, the lowest denominator of the electorate, right? So they're not specific, right? It says, I'm reading from his website, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion.
Just seal it like a bathtub.
Right.
It's easy.
We're going to seal it like we sealed my roof this summer to protect against hurricanes.
Very easy.
Right?
And then you're going to deport all the workers who are doing the jobs Americans don't want so that my children can finally realize their dream of like picking onions or like, waking up at 5 a.m. to like roast and, roof a house for people, so great. That'll the thing that I predict for Trump, if he gets half the things that he wants, inflation explodes.
Yeah.
Because Trump wants across the board tariffs. He wants to quote unquote deport a bunch of migrant workers. He wants a presidential oversight of the Federal Reserve, which means like more easy money. That's what he wants.
Mhm.
You know, these people are like deluding themselves, and everything that Trump really wants, like nationalization of critical sectors of industry, you know, subsidies for farm. All of this stuff is going to put huge amounts of inflationary pressure back into the economy.
Sure.
So that's my one prediction: is that if Trump gets any significant portion of what he says he wants, inflation will take off. Price pressures will take off. Money supply growth is going to continue anyway. But just, you know, in terms of the general rise in the price level, due to the combination of all the dumb policy ideas that he has, price pressures will increase dramatically.
The deficit's going to explode, you know, with that as well. Because, you know, Trump did a lot of deficit spending, as do all presidents. But if you also take into account the fact that he wants to lower tax revenues, that's just going to make that deficit even higher. Which,
eliminate income tax. He's like, we'll just pay for everything with tariffs. And it's like, dude, if you wanted to destroy the dollar overnight, like if you want to completely destroy the U.S. bond market overnight, just do that. Because we're already sitting at $2 trillion annual deficits from now until a decade in the future. So,
well, number 13 on his list is keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. So, you know, we've got some conflicting ideas on this list.
Almost like he just said anything that sounded good, you know? What did you say the data was as far as keeping their promises? They do or do not?
Do not. Here, I'll read some of it off. So Biden had, this is all from PolitiFact, by the way, and I'll link this in the show notes if anyone wants to look at it. I might even release my data analysis on this just because I find it very interesting.
That'd be cool.
All right. So Biden made, according to PolitiFact, made 99 promises. Trump made 102. This is prior to their first terms, right? So very comparable number of promises, wide sweeping, you know, a lot of different categories of promises, of course. Biden apparently kept 36 or about 36%, and Trump kept about 25 or about 24% of those promises. Now, broken, 44% broken by Biden and 52, almost 53% broken by Trump. And that leaves some, you know, middle ground. There was 19% of Biden's promises were ended up as like some kind of compromise or half measure, whereas 22.5, almost 23% of Trump's ended up in some kind of half measure. So overall, they're very comparable in number. You could expect a president to achieve somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of the things that they promised to do. You can expect them to break half or more of their promises. And you can expect the remainder of that to be some kind of half measure or compromise solution. So, you know, if I'm looking at these top 20 that are on Trump's website, a third of these, 6 of them he'll do. So I wonder what those 6 are.
Well, I think one promise that he made, which was to the Libertarian National Chair, to try and get Libertarians votes, that is freeing Ross Ulbricht. I could see that one getting done just because it's such a simple thing to do, and it takes zero political capital on his part. Mm-hmm. Like literally no one cares. Like you could tell Democrats, he's releasing Ross Ulbricht. You could tell Republicans, he's releasing Ross Ulbricht. They'll be like, who the heck is that? Who is that?
Is that the WikiLeaks guy?
You could even tell them who it is, and they'd still be like, I don't know. And I surely don't care. You know, but it's just, it's something. And so like, it takes zero political capital. It's a flick of the pen. I could see him doing that one just because it's so easy.
He's not Edward Snowden. You know what I mean? He's not Edward Snowden or Julian Assange.
Exactly.
Who
there is zero political cost to do. Like pardoning someone like that, he would take serious flack from the national security state, you know, and from the panel of, you know, nut jobs at the, you know, WAPO and Wall Street Journal op-ed
This is someone responsible for killing Americans.
Yeah, exactly. He'd never hear the end of that. It'd be terrible press. So I could see him doing the free Ross Ulbricht thing. As far as the major stuff goes, I don't see it. The tariffs on Chinese goods, I do see those going up. But
that was a trend anyway.
That was a trend anyway.
But he wants a universal tariff at 10% for all foreign imported products. All
yeah,
of them.
I can't see his team, because like he's gonna have to put his name on that, and it's gonna be a total loser of a policy.
Well, what does
And
he
I have
care?
to think,
His last term anyway.
I mean, I have to think that the people around him are gonna be like, dude, this is gonna be a terrible idea. Because at least with the tariffs on China, you can sell that very easily as part of a comprehensive package of China is super dangerous. We need to confront China. Like the American people are already primed to think that way and understand it in those terms. And so any attacks against you for that reason, prices are going up a little bit. Oh, what? You don't care about fighting China. Like as long as you have that there,
I don't know, man. If
I
it
could
somehow
definitely
has
see that happening.
if it somehow has like secondary effects of keeping eggs expensive, I think people would care.
I don't see really anything like that. I mean, with China, the biggest thing is going to be things like manufactured goods and finished products and stuff like that.
So like I
But
can't
again,
afford to buy
there
my
are
kids shoes because all of them get made in China.
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens there as far as like the value added, like the low value added chain. Like I said, I think I've told you guys this before. One of my favorite things to do when I go to like Walmart is look and see where things are made.
Mm-hmm.
And like more and more things are made in like India, Vietnam, Cambodia. Like fewer and fewer like low value added goods are coming from China. And it's because China has long since ceased to be the sort of just low cost, low value added workshop of the world. Like that stuff is moving elsewhere. China has moved up the value chain. I mean, I think the reason that you're seeing this, the EU did it too, is targeting Chinese like electric vehicles, for example, because they put out electric vehicles, and I mean for $13,000, you wouldn't believe what you can buy. I mean, you might be aware, like it's absolutely baffling. Actually, the Ford CEO, Farley, I think his name is. You can look this up. He's been driving a Chinese electric vehicle.
A BYD, I think, right?
Yep. For the last 6 months. And he says, I don't want to give it up. And this is Tom Farley, the head of Ford. Their company's been gobbling up subsidies from the American government, to build EVs and stuff. And actually, they took a huge write down actually on a lot of that stuff. So yeah, I think there's very clear political constituencies that you have to serve. And so like protecting jobs in places like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, those manufacturing and those steel jobs, like you have to do that politically because those states matter. And so again, like Henry said, the policy of tariffs and stuff, and especially towards China, that's going to continue. And it's just simple politics. It really has nothing to do with economics. It's just politics at this point. It's subsidizing important political constituencies for either major party. And we're going to pay the cost for that. We're going to pay higher prices for that, but it's to protect, those jobs, important voters.
Let's talk about foreign policy, because we already know that Trump's going to bring in some freaks. One of his promises, or something, I don't even know if it's his promise, but he's alluding to it, that no, it is a promise, because he says day one after he's elected, he'll be able to call Putin and end the war.
Says the same thing about Gaza,
which Putin said no.
So what do you think the chances are? I know a lot of people who think that's going to be his main policy coup, is ending the war in Ukraine. What do you think the chances of that happening are?
Very close
33%.
to 0. I'm going to go with very close to 0. Russia has committed a great deal to this already. They've bled him out. They've been bled. Vladimir Putin already said, like, whoever's the president, like, it doesn't change our policy. Like, we're very close to achieving our objectives and we're just going to keep going. And for Trump, he should not invest very much political capital in this. Americans don't really care. It's not that high on their list. And he can just continue to say, never would have happened if I'd been president. And this is Joe Biden's disaster mess. And I'm trying my best to clean it up, but I got other things going on. He's not going to expend a lot of political capital on that. And, it'll go where it goes. Europe will probably take a back seat.
most people don't know the war is going on still.
Right. It's
I
like
mean, it
it's
was
not
hot
in the headlines.
news.
Like you have to dig. You have to dig
Yeah.
in the corporate press to find news about this stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
it depends, right? Because the news of North Korean soldiers now entering the fray, I think, has given the Ukraine war a little bit of a spike in the news. I have been seeing
Definitely.
headlines about that, but that's more for like, fear mongering clickbait rather than, this is a hot topic that Americans care about reading about. But I agree with Joe. I don't think that the US and to a greater extent Trump has any political or material leverage over Putin's decision making in this war. I think you're absolutely right. I think he's way too entrenched in it to, even if we did have leverage to do anything about it. We're going to put more sanctions on Russia. It's the most sanctioned country in the world right now. Like, where are we going to embargo, like hard embargo them? Good luck. We're going to start a war with them. That's not Trump's MO. I'll give Trump credit for not starting any wars in the past. Like, if he continues that trend, he's not going to want to do that either. We're gonna give Ukraine more advanced weapons. Putin's already said it that would be an antagonistic, offense, and that he would strike the countries, under which that provided them those weapons. Like Putin was saying he wanted to hit Poland or Romania if F-16s are flying out of Poland and Romania to strike deep into Russia. Like, we have no leverage. There's no leverage there.
So, I was reading the other day.
Leverage and yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was reading the other day. This guy in Zelensky's cabinet went on like some diplomatic meeting and just never came back to the country. The war is going to be won on the battlefield, and the only thing that Trump will do is try to salvage something for them at the end. Like, he'll try to step up and be like, I got Zelensky a good deal. He got to keep Kiev. Like, that will be
That's
the thing.
exactly
like,
it. It'll be a spin. It'll be spin at the end. Just Trump trying to put something out there.
And most likely, I haven't been following the battlefield stuff as much as I used to, but it certainly looks like all the momentum is with Russia. The Ukrainians are retreating out of Kursk. They've
must be reading different things, man. Because last thing I heard about Kursk is that they sent a shit ton of North Koreans in there and they got their asses handed to them.
That's not true, man. That's fake news. The North Koreans are not on the Ukrainian battlefront, man. They're on there are people studying, but they're not fighting, man. They're like
they've captured several of them. So what are they doing on the front lines?
What, according to the Ukrainians?
They have video, dude. I've watched it.
Yeah, some random Asian guy they put on a uniform, dude. Yo, the Ukrainian state is
Asian guys, plural?
They're Asian people who are there, like, believe it or not, and they just throw you, like, they do photo cropping, and they're like, oh, look, we got a North Korean soldier. The Ukrainian state is completely
conspiracy theory for me, man. I've seen what I've seen. We can agree to disagree on the point.
Ukrainian state is completely is 100% desperate. Like, they will do anything at this point. The state is in a matter of survival. I've been saying that. I've been one of those people who've been like, yeah, Ukraine's going to collapse in a couple of months, and like, they've been going on for over 2 years at this point. So I've underestimated their two things. Their first and foremost, their will to fight, and second, the amount like how much their military was built up. But Russia has most of Donbass now. I think pretty much virtually all of it. There's really not that much. I mean, it's just a matter of like, how much else do you want to lose at this point? And I don't like the deals that would be politically acceptable that are being thrown out are like, hey, like, this is what we'll do. Like, they won't join NATO, but you get up and you leave all the area, you can keep Crimea, but you have to give up all the other territories that you annex. And I'm just like, that's not going to happen, man. They're not doing that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing is the things that would be politically acceptable in the United States are not the things that are politically acceptable in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And now that Trump is in office, this is not Trump's war. You can make all the arguments you want about, his role in escalating things and all that stuff. But like, that's all so much interesting intellectual blather for the 1% of us who actually care about that stuff. It's so far down voters' priority lists. Trump has so little reason to try to do anything about this. To Danny's point, they have zero leverage. There's nothing they can do about it. I really think it's just going to be at the end. Trump will try and, sell whatever deal eventually happens, which who knows how long it will take for this thing to finish up. I mean, the Ukrainians have put up incredible resistance. I think we've all learned a lot in terms of what modern battlefields will look like. In terms of just kind of the flexibility and nuance of the different types of weapons that are being deployed and how they're being used, especially vis-a-vis drones. But at the end of the day, the Ukrainians are entirely dependent on outside aid. Russia is not. Russia has more people, and they're closer. Obama was absolutely right about that. The policy always should have been different, but it wasn't. And here we are. It's very sad. But I mean, I'm honestly... I feel bad saying it, but like I only check in on it a couple times a week at this point. I just think
more than
it's
a lot of
sad.
people do. So
Right. It is partly my job. Like, so I do check in on it, but I just feel sad about it because these people are getting chewed up. Their country's being completely destroyed. And, look at what it's going to do to the front line of Europe there. Like, they're going to have a hostile, angry Russia on their border now for at least a generation. When it never had to be that way. Russia had an aging population and a not dynamic economy. They were just going to be Europe's gas station. They were going to meddle. They were going to meddle in the politics of like Ukraine and have their favorite oligarchs in places like Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia and stuff. But like, that was fine. It was much better than this. Most of my focus, foreign policy wise, is on the Middle East, where I'm really just an observer, and then of course China. So
well, let's turn to the Middle East because I think that's a little bit higher up on most voters.
Yeah, that's the big question, and I think that's where a lot of the fear comes in with this with Trump, because look at his primary funders. They're all major Zionists. The Adelson family famously said, we have, or Sheldon Adelson, he said, I'm a one issue voter, and that issue is Israel. And then you see, Zionist Democrats who previously were supported Biden, like Bill Ackman, funding, supporting Trump. So the question is like, what do they want? Like, how much obviously the U.S. gives unconditional support, and that policy will transfer to Trump, which has transferred to every president since really Bill Clinton. What else can what else can the U.S. government give to them that they haven't received already? Like, that's the big question. Like, do they want a war with Iran? Do they want the diplomatic coverage to ethnically cleanse the West Bank? Do they just want, is this just like insurance? Like, do they want the United States government to crack down on anti-Israel dissenters? Like, what do they want? And then what would the Trump administration be willing to give them? Because I'm of the opinion that a war with Iran is really not, it's something that the deep state of America does not want at all. They realize how much of a Leviathan task that would be, and that they would not be able to physically change that regime without putting boots on the ground, which is politically unfeasible. They could do some airstrikes and, maybe take out some, maybe some nuclear facilities. But Iran actually does have deterrence where, not only do they have ballistic missiles that are in range of Israel, but, their real deterrent is going after the global oil supply. And if they were to, let's say, take out or shut down the Strait of Hormuz, or even working in conjunction with the Houthis, firing upon Saudi oil fields, then that could cause a global crisis. So I think Iran has too many deterrents for an actual regime change. So what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think the Middle Eastern policy will look like?
I don't see it changing really, just because foreign policy is so low on voters' priority lists. I agree that the Middle East is higher on the priority list than Ukraine at this point, but foreign policy is low. It's low on voters' priority list. One interesting poll that I did see, and this was actually on Fox News last night during the election coverage, they showed it several times, was support for continued U.S. arming of Ukraine, unconditional, strong support of Ukraine, was stronger, 10 points stronger. And that was in the 30s, was 10 points stronger than continued strong support of Israel. So I thought that was very interesting. I mean, it was in the high 20s, the percentage of those polled by Fox News who said they wanted to strongly support Israel. I think that's a pretty incredible number. It shows that there is, I thank the internet for it. So now you can just look and see what's going on. It doesn't have to be some kind of abstract thing. It doesn't have to be some kind of argument about the history. You can just show someone a picture of what's going on and be like, no, seriously, this is what's going on. And it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be a part of that. That's horrible. And so, but again, I don't know that the policy will change because, number one, there won't be any political gains or losses. I think Trump would actually stand to lose more politically if he tried to pull back from support. And so I think the policy will most likely stay the same. And number two, he gave a speech here in Michigan. He had a group of Arab American community leaders from the Dearborn area join him on stage. And he was championing that he would bring peace back to the region, that he would end the war. By which I am assuming he means a return to the program of trying to get the Abraham Accords done, which played a significant role in sparking this entire latest round of violence anyway. So, I mean, that's just another Trump policy that wound up exploding while Biden was in office, and Biden wound up catching the flack for it, even though it was a stupid Trump policy that did this anyway. So, they're just going to go back to trying to buy off, the monarchies and stuff to try and get them to sell out the Palestinians. So
I think you're onto something here. I'd like to piece together a few things that you're saying and maybe add a little bit more. I agree with you that it's not on the voters' priority list to do something about this, as it is to do something about, say, the economy or immigration or other hotter topics. However, that's only really important before an election. Election's over. He won. Now, I think what's most likely to happen is whatever he thinks is going to enrich himself the most. And I think that if you look at how the foundations of the Abraham Accords are rooted in these kind of backdoor deals, right? There are, there's a lot of money that goes into the setting up of these kinds of deals, especially with some of these Arab nations. You talked about, like, buying off the monarchies. Well, the monarchies were also buying off Trump, right? And, the last number I saw was like over $500,000 of foreign money coming into Trump companies during his, not $500,000, $500 million coming into Trump's companies vis-a-vis, like, oh, they're here's the Saudi government staying in Trump's hotels in DC, because that makes, that makes the relationship that much sweeter. I think if you look at also what Henry had been saying earlier, look at all of Trump's donors, and a lot of the biggest ones are Zionists, right? I think he just does whatever makes the most sense for him, and not necessarily whatever makes the most sense for the electorate, or whatever makes the most sense for the Middle East, or whatever makes the most sense even for the Palestinians. That would be like the last on the list. I think it's nice and encouraging that he brought on a bunch of Arab leaders to try to make, some inroads with those electorate, but it's not really going to make a difference. Like, he said he was going to build a wall in 2016 and he didn't build the wall. Like, say all you want. Actions will speak louder than words. And I think we've seen demonstrable actions from Trump's first term to suggest that they'll do pretty much anything that enriches them. And what happens to enrich them the most are interests that align the closest with Israel, whether that was moving the embassy or, allowing more settlements to go through in the West Bank, or, setting up Abraham Accords, which, as you said, Joe, were part and parcel with the reason why this conflict even started in the first place, or at least the most recent iteration of this conflict, not to oversimplify the Israel-Palestine issue. I think he's just going to do whatever makes the most sense for him, whatever's going to make him the most money.
I mean, he's let's look at the money he's taken. Like, it's not a matter of him continuing. To me, it's a given that at the very least he'll continue the current policy. It's a matter of, like, will he? Because there are certain levels of red lines that we have with Israel right now. They're very flexible, but for example, the United States did not engage in Israel's counterattack against Iran
under Biden.
Under Biden. So clearly there was some type of red line. We'll give them whatever they want. We'll give them whatever munitions they ask for, and not ask questions. Pretend like we're concerned about civilian casualties, but give them diplomatic coverage and be like, oh, they're investigating it, it's all right. And then they'll put in fake stories about how Biden yelled at Yahoo that are obviously fake. But the question is like, will that support escalate? Because the red line really is like, the U.S. is not going to put troops on the ground to fight with Israel, but they will fund them and pay for everything and give them diplomatic coverage. So will the United States, in that policy, and just before I go into this, that policy used to work in the 60s and the 70s, because at that time the Israelis didn't really need any assistance from the United States on the battlefield when they were fighting these conventional wars with Egypt and Syria and Jordan. They didn't really need too much U.S. assistance. Now it's very different. Like, there's been so many equalizers on the battlefield with drone technology and ballistic missile technology, and the entire area is armed to Hezbollah and is armed to the teeth. So Iran has advanced missile technology. They can't really fight. They can't really handle this war without us. They don't have the ability to knock out Hezbollah, clearly, as we're looking at the battle situation in Lebanon. They don't have the ability to take out Iran, clearly. They would have to resort to nuclear weapons if they were going to, achieve their quote unquote goals of removing the Iranian regime. So is it like an Iraq war situation where they basically, this is the greatest fear with the Trump presidency. Is it a Iraq war situation where you have essentially Israeli partisans in the form of the neoconservatives hijacking U.S. foreign policy to remove Saddam Hussein at the behest of Israel? Does that happen with the Trump administration with Iran? That's the big fear. I don't think it will happen. I think that is not likely, just because the U.S., we don't have the ability to do it. But it still is a possibility, and it's scary.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's likely that they'll will depose Iranian leadership on the behest of um, of Israel, but I think it's probably just more likely that we let them slow burn their way through this war, give them everything we need. They'll annex the West Bank eventually, and
And that's the other big thing. If they annex the West Bank, that will cause so many more issues than they're going through than they have right now. I mean, at the West Bank, all these occupied areas are effectively annexed territory. It's like a ruse that we say they're occupied. They're annexed territories,
well,
and these
Area
people
C
just
at
live
least,
as
yeah.
these people just live as subjects in annexed territories. The question is, do we give them the diplomatic coverage or diplomatic cover to pursue an ethnic cleansing campaign like they're doing in Gaza in the West Bank? That's another thing that's scary. That would cause, I think, worse problems because Gaza is kind of like, no one really gave a fuck about Gaza. Like, there's not, like, the people who live in Gaza are refugees from the Nakba. Those are the people who live in Gaza. There is more of an historic tie to the West Bank than there had been in Gaza. And then Gaza had the pretext of there being Hamas. There is no Hamas in the West Bank, even though they are probably more popular than they do. I mean, could anything like that happen? That's the question. There would obviously have to be a casus belli. Like, there'd have to be some type of a terrorist attack there for them to do it. But that's the rumor why the Adelsons are that's the promise that Trump gave the Adelsons. It's a rumor. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I don't even know that they need to give them like diplomatic cover. They can just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Like anyone who's been watching, God, what's his name? Ned Price, that awful State Department spokesperson, Defense Department spokesperson, who just like gives these like totally awful responses. That he's got that like weird, gross, like kind of chuckle, that kind of like aw shucks kind of chuckle. If you know who I'm talking about, this pencil dude in the suit.
Dude.
Yeah,
He's like
awful. This guy's absolutely awful. But he's the epitome of it. Like, what's going on already? Like, you already said it. Anyone who's pulled up a map and looked at the West Bank knows there's no state there. There's no viable state there. There's too many settlements. They're everywhere. I was speaking with a Haaretz journalist over the summer who said flat out, there's no getting them people out of there. And Haaretz people are not like, oh yeah, super Israel. Like, they're two-state solution people. And even he was like very down on it, very bummed out. Like, honestly, if you tried to get the settlers out of there, they'd fight the military. And they're armed to the teeth, he said. Like, It'd be a civil war inside of Israel, and no government's going to try and do it. And he was not pleased about it. He hated Benjamin Netanyahu even more than me. So this guy was very bummed out about it. And that's the truth. And right now, you can see it. Like, they're literally going around terrorizing these poor people, running bulldozers through their neighborhoods, ripping stuff up. And the U.S. government doesn't need to provide diplomatic support for it. They just need to say nothing, because it's not something that their own population is going to pressure them about. We're no longer in an election year. It's the Democrats who are supposed to be speaking up for them. They're not. The Republicans aren't going to. I think Henry is, or I think it was Henry. Didn't you say the national security state doesn't want a war with Iran, so it's not going to happen, right? And I think that's absolutely
at least I don't
true.
think so. I don't think they're that crazy.
I think a couple of weeks ago we got a very clear indication of that, because someone at the Defense Department leaked what Israel was saying they were planning on doing to the Iranians to kind of get out in front of it. And that's not something you do to one of your allies if you're actually serious about them going hard on one of your mutual enemies. That's not the case. It was done in order to start a controversy over it, to put pressure on them not to do something stupid that the national security state didn't want them to do. Politically, someone like Mike Pompeo, who's just a total ass, like, of course he's going to go out there and say, ring of fire, save Israel, fight Iran and stuff. But like, he's just a politician. That's all he is. He's a former congressman from somewhere in the middle states, Montana, Wyoming, someplace like that. You know, he's a politician. The actual brass and the deep state people, they don't want to fight Iran. They're far more interested in China. Getting bogged down in Iran's a terrible idea. You know, that's like super Iraq. You know, that's terrible. They don't want anything to do with that. So, you know, they're honestly, again, like politically, Trump will do nothing. You know, maybe be more accommodating. Maybe. I think Danny raised an interesting point in terms of like, look, if we assume that he's done after this term, he's probably just out to enrich himself. He doesn't care. Um, you know, and the national security state's focus is on China. And I know they try and group like Iran, North Korea, Russia, China together, you know, like they're the new axis of evil or something. But really it's about China, and it's about maintaining the force, posture, flexibility to be able to engage with the Chinese. That's what they want to do. And so they'd really like the Middle East to calm down. And so anything that will get that over faster and quieter is probably what they're for. And so yeah, it's a very downbeat look on that situation. But I definitely agree with Henry. Like the situation has totally changed. There's been a leveling out of that situation there militarily. The Israelis are very dependent on the United States. Washington basically props up their economy with money. So, you know, it's just, you know, Capitol Hill is kind of occupied territory in that sense. You know, Ron Paul was absolutely right about that.
Well, I mean, I'm of the opinion that the Israeli state is in it's already reached its peak, and it's going down the slope of where it will eventually become a failed state. Not there yet. Probably won't be there, you know, for another 2 decades. But the state itself, I don't think is going to be able to sustain itself very much longer. It doesn't have long-term posterity. Just the way the demographic trends are going there, the way that the whole world hates them. You know, it's just something I don't think that they're going to be able to continue, especially as public support in the United States is just going to keep on decreasing. So it's depressing because there's just no hope for the Palestinians, but I don't know, what can you do at this point? That's the sad thing. Before we end, why don't we switch over to China real quick? Because I know we've had you here for an hour, almost over an hour and a half. What do you think? We already talked about it a little bit. You know, most likely China policy is going to stay consistent between Biden and Trump. Do you think there will be any deviation between Trump and Biden's China policy, or do you think they'll escalate it? He'll you know, try to buddy up with China, Xi Jinping. Like, what's your take on it?
I honestly foresee the status quo. I mean, tensions are already very bad. Early statements by the CCP press office basically say like they're not counting on relations thawing. And again, like Trump's slate of policies are not ones that are going to warm the heart over there. I just foresee relations being bad. Like the Chinese state and the American state, you know, the bureaucracies that run them have conflicting priorities. There are overlapping spheres of influence there, and so there's going to continue to be friction. And we just all have to hope that you know, a little bit of extra inflation is the worst. A little bit of, you know, more expensive goods is the worst that we get out of this. You know, I'll settle for things staying cold. You know, so that's my prediction for the Trump years. Like, yes, there will probably be more tariffs. No, there's not going to be any kind of like arms control agreement. There's not going to be a change in the status over Taiwan or anything like that. There will be a continued effort to get allies on side in terms of a new containment policy toward China. Probably relations with India will improve a little bit because Trump doesn't care about human rights or anything like that. So there will probably be some warming there. But the Indians are very fickle. They're not gung ho to be the front line in a battle with China. So, but that's really it. There won't be a terrible change. The policy has been the same now for over 8 years, and it will continue that way. So,
It seems like the result of this election has been more of just a cultural thing where, it always feels like before an election that the country's at knife's edge. Just having people feel like they won is, I think sometimes it could just freaking reduce kind of cultural domestic tensions. But then again, these tensions really just come up during election season anyway. So how true is it? Everyone has all these narratives, but we all take these samples from like the internet and like Twitter, which is not real life. Like when you're surveying like Twitter and what people care about, it's not reflective of like what actual people are thinking. So I think a lot of people are guilty of taking coming up with kind of distorted views on the political scene, but including myself for that matter. But one more question: is there anything to BRICS? Like, is this something that people are hyping it up like it's gonna become the new reserve currency, which obviously I don't really buy. But like, what is your take on BRICS in terms of its significance?
well, I guess I would say that there is a long line of countries who want to join BRICS, but there's also a battle within BRICS about the future direction of BRICS. So you have countries like Russia and China, for example, who would like to present BRICS, as sort of the makings of an alternative world order to the more Western dominated set of institutions and arrangements. And then you have the other ones who are just saying, no, this is just like a new club for growth, basically. And so at first we'll have to see how that shakes out, especially as more countries get added to the organization. I think the odds of it becoming it's hard, it's hard to forecast into the future how that's going to go. I mean, I like it's hard to say. I mean, at first we'll have to see how the members of BRICS themselves sort out what the institution is going to be, what the group is going to be. Obviously, if Russia and China got their way, then maybe there could be something to that. But I don't see us ever. I mean, I think the U.S. dollar will probably wind up losing its reserve status. Not due to any actions that other governments take or any other organizations take. It's going to be because of Washington's own profligacy. So that's a totally different conversation. But I don't, some new gold-backed currency, something like that. You hear about that every once in a while. I don't see that being a realistic thing because no government actually wants to be bound in that way. The way that a gold standard makes you be bound and constrained in what you can do. All governments want the power to be able to expand the money supply at the snap of their fingers. Everyone wants that. All the governments want that. So they're never going to do that. And so, it's just a question of whether or not the United States is able to get things under control. There's no doubting that the U.S. financial markets are very deep. The dollar denominated markets are very deep, but everyone thought the pound sterling was untouchable. And look where we are now. So it'll again, I think a lot depends on how Washington chooses to act in the next 20 years. I would say outlook bearish. I think we're moving more towards like a basket of currencies. Which seems to be more sensible anyway.
A cornucopia of cash.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Hard to say.
Well, I appreciate that. We're closing in on almost 2 hours here, so I figure we should probably let Joe go. Joe, you want to impart any last words? Tell us how we can find you or how we can support you. Anything you like.
Well, as most of you know, I'm at the Libertarian Institute. I'm a fellow there. The Ralph Raico Fellow actually is my official title. I've got a new book coming out at the Institute. It's about the national debt, actually. And I have a chapter about possible futures there. But most of the book is more devoted to like explaining what it is, how it works, like the actual like boring mechanics of like what is a treasury auction, how does it work, who's bidding on this stuff, where's all the debt at. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, I write a weekly column at the Libertarian Institute. I got a book coming out. I post videos of my lectures at the university. Those are actually just for my students, for those who don't show up for class on a given day, but they are there. Yeah, there's that, and that's pretty much it. You know, pretty much just doing the same things. The campaign is over. I'm so grateful for that. And, you know, but today is actually the first day of the next cycle. So I really am already very behind. So
that's good to know. We'll make sure to leave some links for how to find you in the show notes there.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thank you for having me, guys. It's always so fun to chat with you guys.
Likewise.
The pleasure is ours, man. We really appreciate it. And congratulations again on the campaign. And, you know, we're excited to see what future endeavors you take and your book that's coming out, which I'm sure we'll want to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Peace, guys. Oh, wait, before we say peace, we do, I always forget to pitch it. So we have a Substack now. So everyone who is subscribed to our Patreon has been given complimentary, free access forever for the paid content. So if you had a Patreon, you have access to the paywall content in our Substack. So go over there. The other thing is that you get our episodes ad free, which is nice. And then you also get a bunch of other exclusive content. We post a lot of articles on the Substack. So there's a lot of additional content at the Substack. It's Substack at bro/bro history. You know our handle name. So search us there. There's a lot of content. We're really trying to build this Substack up, so it's something that's special. So make sure that you go to the Substack. And that's all I had to say. Peace, guys.
Peace.